In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we are coloring conversations on the canvas of America. Tonight, our special guest is Mr. Wendell Fant. Wendell Fant currently serves as a distinguished career and technical education instructor at Central Severus High School, where he teaches business and personal finance with a passion for economic empowerment. Wendell also works as a financial coach, guiding individuals and families toward financial independence and generational wealth creation. His professional journey spans both corporate America and public service, including his role as Deputy District Director for North Carolina's 8th Congressional District. Wendell brings a wealth of leadership experience from the private sector, civic engagement, and military service. A retired Chief Warrant Officer in the United States Marine Corps Reserves, Wendell honorably served for 23 years, including deployments during the Gulf War in '91 and Operation Iraqi Freedom 2005-2006. His commendations include the Navy Unit Commendation, Kuwait Liberation Medal, Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, and Iraq Campaign Medal. Wendell is deeply committed to community development and equity. He has served on numerous civic boards, including the Mecklenburg County Human Relations Board, the Community Relations Committee, and the Fireman's Relief Board. He currently chairs the board of the Salisbury Rowing Community Action Agency and serves on the board of Logan Community Daycare. He is also an active member of the Cabarrus Rotary Club and proudly celebrates 32 years of brotherhood in Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Academically, Wendell holds a Master's of Business Administration from Webster University, a Bachelor of Science from Charleston Southern University, and a certification in entrepreneurship from Syracuse University. He has been married to his high school sweetheart, Jennifer, for 27 years, and together they are proud parents of their son, Donovan. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wendell Fant. Hello, sir.
Hey, how are you?
How are you?
Very well.
Welcome back, and it's good to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
So, is there anything you'd like to add to your bio before we get into the show?
Well, I think you covered it well, and we're good. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yes, sir. Well, so let's start with what you do as an educator and mentor and your instruction in business instruction in high school. What inspired you to teach business to high school students?
Hmm. I was in corporate America for a little while, and had some good tours, some good runs, but there was just something at some point in my career it really just didn't mean anymore anything anymore. So I wanted to do something that I would have an impact and that was meaningful. And what better place than education? So I was afforded an opportunity to come teach, and I enjoyed it. To be able to pour into some young minds and share what knowledge I had, and and prepare them for life, which is hopefully where they spend most of their time, right after high school, then college, then after high school than high school. So I want just to prepare them, make them ready, and be successful, whatever that meant for them.
Oh wow. So in the process of teaching them business, I mean like when you're doing that, does that expansive or does that kind of like just stay within the generalities of business? Like do you specify, economics? Do you specify you know, like what they do in finance with being an analyst or being a planner? Do you specify that or is it just general?
Um, let's see. So we have a curriculum. However, you know, so at times we do deviate when students are interested in finance or in economics. And we'll go there. The best thing about teaching business and finance and economics is, it's really in real time. There's a lot that's going on that that I can educate them on or share with them. And I believe I have a unique experience because having been in the industry, now I'm able to transfer that into more than just that book knowledge that they got. We can turn to real live activities that can benefit them on down the road. Certainly something that I didn't have when I was in high school. You had the book, you had the teacher, that was it.
Okay. So, I know that's a little bit different from the times that when you and I went to school. So kind of like, how does the difference in instruction today compares to, what was instructed back then? How does that mesh? How do you make that come into one?
Yeah. Well, so the goal is really to, you bring that book to life as much as possible.
Hmm.
And we can put up PowerPoints, and we can read from a book or a curriculum, and that's all that they get, right? So how do we actually apply those things where it can be meaningful to them? And so I'm able to, we have guest speakers, we have actual things that's going on in real time, that I'll introduce them into our curriculum at that time. And you have them doing, maybe some project work, maybe some actual work that they can, maybe take home, check out certain, maybe podcast or internet, or there's a number of ways to, to bring that paper to life for them and make it active. And it's really beneficial to those that, not everyone in high school works, but those that work in high school have a job. They get it a little faster. Some are passionate about it and they still get it, but when they're working, it means just a little bit more to them. So really, just bringing the outside into that curriculum and showing them how it's going to affect them, because really at that point, kids really don't care, unless they can feel it, yeah, unless they can feel that connection with them. And so that's my goal at the end of the day, is to help them make that connection.
So, how do you define entrepreneurial literacy for young Black students?
How do I define that?
Yes.
Yeah, great question. Um, well, I would say, to encourage them to first give it a shot. That's where a lot of them are afraid to fail, and I let them know, hey, you're young, it's okay, to fail. Let that be a learning moment for you. And once I can get them past that, that initial, and I don't know where they learn those things from, but unfortunately, we learn those things. And the quicker that I can get them away from that, or the sooner that I can get them away from that and start thinking ownership, right? Because that's where the real wealth lies. You can have a great job, but that's all it is a job. But when you build a business and now you have something that you can pass on to, a legacy down, the family generational, build that generational wealth. And so, excuse me, the goal there is to, excuse me, get them to a point where they're no longer afraid and now, ready and willing to take a chance.
So, what's the first financial principle you teach your students and why?
The first financial principle, well, pay yourself first, right? And so most of the time well, here's how we do in my, and this is what I tell them, this is what we do in the Fant household. God first, that first 10%. That next 10%, you pay yourself, and then you live off whatever else is left. And now the goal there is to get money to you first, right? So that's how Uncle Sam and the IRS works. They're gonna take their money out first before you do anything else. Before you get it, they're gonna take those dollars out. And so I teach them that same thing. You do that, and you'll be okay when it's time for you to retire. There's a 60-year-old that's gonna be glad you did, or really pissed off that you did it, right? And so getting them to save first, that's the first thing that we want them to get into a habit of doing, and then showing them the benefit of what that's going to look like. Unfortunately, sometimes their vision is about 2 or 3 days, maybe a month. But to get an 18-year-old to see what it's going to be like in 60 years, and it comes, and we all hoping that it comes, and it comes fairly quick, right? Even though it takes, 40 something years to get there at that age, it comes, and it comes pretty quick. We can all reflect and look back, man, where did the time go? I wish I had known then what I know now. And so I really don't want any of my young budding entrepreneurs to live through that life saying, man, I wish I had this information back then. And so, I don't want to hold the information. It does me no good if I don't share it. And so my goal is to get it out there and then get them to put it into practice.
So, what are the interactions like in class, especially when you guys get on specified subjects like, let's just say, economics? What are the interactions like?
Well, so what I found in my years of teaching is introduce it to them first, and then come back and have a conversation. Because if they're hearing it from me for the first time, it's a one-sided conversation. But if I give them a little piece of something just to go on, and we build from that, and then we would again we would take it outside of the classroom and see what's going on. Say, for example, with the Federal Reserve, how's that going to affect you, and what does that mean that interest rates are going down, and and how do you benefit from going down or up, or what should you look for when it's going down or up, and even protecting your credit, because if you do everything right, and you and I go down and purchase a car, my credit is a 520 and yours is a 780, same car, but we're going to be paying something different, right? And showing them how to protect that credit, how to build it. And it is there for you because unfortunately, everybody won't be able to pay cash for a house. So you want to be able to protect that credit. You may not be able to pay cash for everything, but even with that, you still want to live within your means, because you can make $250,000 a year, spend 251, and you're broke.
You can say that a million at one time, and that's so true. And I think that's the importance I think of the kids learning interest rates. So when you teach interest rates, I mean, do you teach it from the perspective of, let's say, like when you say the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates, right? Do you teach them as to if that's affecting, let's say, that's housing and that's loans? Do you teach it from that perspective and also give them the opportunity to go through that scenario and learn how to actually calculate that interest?
We do. And so in doing that, excuse me, in doing that, it allows them to, actually put pen to paper and see how it actually works, right? So if we just have a conversation, it's that in theory, right? And so as they're learning those things, I do ask them, hey, check out with your parents, because you should be learning these things anyway. Check with your parents and see what theirs is like, right? And ask them, allow them to invite you or ask to be invited, when they're sitting at that kitchen table doing the bills. And so now you get to see it real live time that, these are some real things that I'm going to face. Am I prepared? Right? right? What's it going to take for me to get prepared? But as much as possible, there are a number of tools that you can use online. We partner with a local bank. They come in and show kids what happens in real life, right? It's a scenario based, but um, single parent household, both parents household, kids, then they'll throw something in there that will um, that cause everything to blow up, right? Emergencies happen, So and those things happen, in real life, and to us every single day. Are we prepared for them? And that's the goal, is to make sure that we are prepared for those things, right? So um, if I have a $20,000 emergency account, if I have a blowout on the road, at that point in time, it's just an inconvenience. But if I don't have that, it's a serious emergency. Now I'm panicking. What do I do? And so we're really working hard to make sure that it's just something that happens and it's an inconvenience, not a true emergency.
So, how do you make business education culturally relevant in your classroom?
Mhm. Well, show them. Again, I have to go back to real life, and not use my example. I'll share with them. Hey, coming out the gate, I struggled. It was tough, and getting over those barriers and learning and understanding all of these things that's going to happen to you. If you have an idea of how the game is played, then you can set yourself up for success. If you don't have that idea or that concept, then it's going to be a little challenging when you meet those challenges. And so, giving them facts and figures, is good. However, I believe when I bring myself into the picture, or bring in a guest speaker and ask them to, just be brutally honest with the kids and let them know, the options or the obstacles that they may face and how you've overcome those things, right? And so, again, there is a challenge because they see us as older and far removed. They're not even close to that age, but getting them to see that these things can happen to you even at a young age, and it's okay to fail, right? If you fail, just make it something that you learn from. It's okay to fail, but you can't fail at the same thing 5 and 6 times. So you do want to get some kind of an education out of that, right? And then move forward and keep progressing, and set those goals so that if you're on the right track or not.
Well, so let me ask you this, because I think a lot of kids, especially these younger kids, some may have some ideas about what it is to be disciplined and structured. Do
Mhm.
you ever use your military experience, in some of your teaching moments to really give them that down to the bone fact of these are some of the things that are real?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I may use it just about every day. Just about every day. I will share with them, what it takes. So discipline and being consistent will get you to success. You got to have both.
Mhm.
Motivation is not enough to keep you there. It'll keep you there for a couple of days, for a moment, maybe even for a week, but it's long gone. But when you're disciplined and you set that standard, right? If I'm in business, I'm going to make 15 calls a day, not 14, 15, right? Or more. So you start to set that standard. But when you make that, if you don't have the discipline, it's really tough. And not tell them about the Marine Corps and boot camp and what it took to get everyone on one accord, because you've got at the start of boot camp, maybe 90 individuals, and that's 90 different ideas and concepts about what they think discipline is. And so now the drill instructor's job is to show us what that means and how to work as a team. And your discipline could really cost someone their life if you don't have it, right? And so it's that important. And I tell the students that, I'm the way that I am because, I want you to be successful, and having discipline is certainly a key factor in that equation. And the Marine Corps has done an amazing job with me, not only me, but others as well, in instilling that discipline. and and showing them what that looks like. They know I'm always on time, right? They know I'm going to be consistent. They know I'm going to be firm. I'm going to do what I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. And and being consistent, they'll see that, and then they start to buy in at that time.
Mm. So, what's a moment when a student's breakthrough reminded you why you teach?
Very few times, but there have been times during the school year. you know, um, I'm known as a tough teacher, but I'm also known that they also know that I care, and I am extremely tough, and I'm rigid, and I'm dialed in. My expectations are extremely high, and I tell them, hey, if that bell rings and you're 3 feet from that door, and you're not inside that door when that bell rings, you got to go get a pass, right?
Ooh.
Yeah. so, so that's the way that I am, but I know it serves a purpose for them, to be on time, and they know that the expectations is when it comes to me, and how rigid that I am or can be, but they know that I care. I'll start out with about 28, 30 kids, and it'll dwindle down because unfortunately some kids don't want to do that work. But getting back to that original question, uh, at the end of class, I have a number of students, or I'll see them in the hallways, the following semester or something, and they'll appreciate it. During graduation, I'll have a number of students say, I appreciate you being tough on me, and I understand now. And so that to me is worth more than I can get paid. It's the biggest check that I can receive, is knowing that what I was aiming for, I achieved.
How do you balance textbook theory with real world applications?
Mhm. Um, well, I'll let them know, hey, textbook is textbook, right? And it may not always apply, right? And then real life is, I mean, in real time, so you just have to be prepared. That book can help us be prepared, but that real life element comes into play, right? What happens when, I'm talking about how to balance a checkbook, and all you have is theory, and then when it's time to do it, well, at least you got some knowledge. But if you didn't, if I couldn't tell them, this is what happened in real life, all you have is knowledge. And then now you really starting again at that same starting point of having to figure things out. Whereas now you have a knowledge base that you can at least build from to be successful at the thing that you really needed to be successful at that time.
So when you're like, for the subject matter in which you teach, like, what are some examples as to some of the practicalities that you're allowed to use in your teaching methods, or just instruction in general, that basically bring these kids to the point of, knowing that this is how the business world or sector operates, but for those that want to think about entrepreneurship, do you take it a little bit higher?
I do, so I'll use an example. So when it's time to start investing, I'll tell them, hey, you can start now. And I'll ask them, when can you start investing? They say, well, I can't start until I'm 18. I'll ask, well, who told you that, right? And so sometimes it starts with the information and where did we get it from? So dispelling some of those myths. So I'm not trying to go against your parents. However, you can start as early, as really as you have a job, right? If you're a baby actor, you have a job, so you can invest at that time. You'll have a minor account, but you can invest. And then, I'll take them through an investment challenge that they can see how money is working, right? We've got one that we'll do throughout the semester. We've got another one that it's condensed into 20 minutes. Each minute represents a year. They don't know which year it is, but they got to balance that, right? And know that, hey, something is coming at some point in time that I may lose some value. Now it's real easy. A lot of them say, well, is this the way it's like in real life? I'm like, well, yeah, it is, but it's a little different when it's your real money, right? And so we're not as aggressive as as we are on a game, but they get the concept. And I'm telling them, hey, consider a whole year when you invest, consider 5 years when you invest 10 and own out to 40. I give them a 40-year look at what they could do, potentially what they could do or have or earn if they're consistent with with investing, right? With entrepreneurship, again, it's bringing the outside in and having those conversations with those students and tell them, hey, this is how you run a business. This is some of the pitfalls that you might see, and this is how you overcome those things. And so gathering all the information or material facts that you can. Now, don't be analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis, but get all the information of the material fact that you can to help you make the best decision that you can, right? And I'm up and I'm straight up and honest with them. School is not for everyone, and that's okay. Yep.
And I think that's one thing that's from a reality perspective
Mhm.
that a lot of kids do need to hear that because like going to get a trade is really simple and much
Mhm.
is best for a lot of kids, but
Yeah.
but it's still education. But I think to just impose that you need to go to college, that don't work for every child.
Right.
And a lot of those kids, I mean, when they're saying that, I think it's kind of hard for a lot of parents to hear that.
Mhm.
But in those situations and scenarios, I mean, have you had situations to where you're actually doing conferences with parents and you're kind of like giving them some hints about things like that?
I do. I do. I'll let them know exactly what we just talked about is that school's not for everyone. If your child decides to go to a community college, that's perfectly fine, right? And so allow them to do that and allow them to know that you're successful because that's a choice that you made and that's something that you wanted to do. So you're successful. And I tell them, if I got 25 students in here, I've got 25 different types of success, right? Everybody don't want the same thing. So let us help you find your success. And it may not be in a 4-year institution. Just because you go to a 4-year institution doesn't mean you're going to be successful. And just because you don't go doesn't mean you will be, right? So the bottom line is you got to have a plan either way, right? And just letting them parents know, hey, this is an option. This is a viable option for your child. And, why waste that money if they don't want to go? This generation that's coming up now in high school, they have a different view than we do. And all of them don't want to go to school, right? And we shouldn't force them to go. Yeah, you're going to be stuck with if your parents can't pay or you don't get a full scholarship and foot that bill. A lot of kids coming out of college with 30, 40 plus $100 in debt out the gate, right? And so when you flip that and say, all right, so if I have an average um, student loan payment of $500, what does that look like? Right? What does it look like me paying that? So it's going to be years and years and years, decades before I get that thing paid off. However, if I don't have that and I invest and I do that every single month, an average of a rate of return, there's no guarantee now, but I'm just using this as an example, of 10%. I mean, you're looking at $1 million plus, in that 40-year period. Now there are a lot of variables that go into that, but you can see the difference, right? And having those dollars versus having to pay those dollars back, and a lot of parents really don't want to see that, right? And so we're again putting those individuals behind the 8 ball when they're just getting started in life.
So, like with being in Charlotte,
Mhm.
and I know Mecklenburg County is the biggest county in the state. Are most of your schools county schools or are they city schools?
So I'm actually in Cabarrus, but they're county. I mean, it's all over. I don't know what the percentage is in city versus the county, but some inner city, a few, but I would say the majority is outside of that city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering because I know, like when they make those determinations of schools that they say are failing schools, schools that are passing schools, then they put the category of private and public. Then they do what's the other thing that they got now? Uh, the other kind of school that's taking the money from the public schools.
The
Yeah,
charter.
yeah, those schools. And so with them doing all of that, and now it's my understanding that they're trying to flip all the schools, especially the ones that are public, that they're flipping them all to that charter school thing, but they're taking all of that public money
Mhm.
and they're abusing it. So I'm just wondering, is that's why when you have schools that they consider to be in urban centers,
Mhm.
if that's actually got some kind of cause and effect on a lot of the school performances.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. Um, I do know that you can't always throw money at a situation. However, the conditions do make a difference, right? If I go to work, feeling nice and with some nice clothes on, I feel better, right? And I'm going to a nice place to work. That's different than going to a place where it's run down. The people that you're around are not particularly motivating. That can have an effect on the outcome of an individual or a community. So I believe that, I mean, you've got a lot of teachers in some of those situations that care, but you also have a lot in that situation that don't care. you know, that's not throwing shade, but that's the truth. You can tell those by wishing Friday would hurry up and get here. Thank God it's Friday. I'm like, I'm thank God. I'm thanking God for every day. Uh, every meal Thanksgiving, and it's a privilege for me. It's a privilege to be able to share and pour into these students, and so that they can have a successful, whatever it is that they're trying to find success with. So that's my goal ultimately. But I work to make those conditions, for the best, right? That is going to be best for them, and let them know it's about them. It ain't got nothing to do with me. This is your education. You should demand more, right? This is yours. Your parents paying for it, those tax dollars, whether you think so or not. But just make it yours.
Well, see, I got to go back and I think I asked that question wrong because that was my main premise is the environment of the schools. So in your school, can you describe what that environment is for us?
At the school that I'm at,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Let's see. So I'll say that we've got a lot of teachers that really care, right? And you can tell, right? If we have a student that is going home, well, that has no home to go to, yeah, we have some teachers that would take them home if they could, So that's how much they care and want them to succeed. We have an amazing administration that cares for our students and hold them accountable. We have, in my department, I can speak, specifically with my department, career technical education. Our goal is to get those young minds prepared for, what's coming ahead of them when they walk out of the school for the last time to be successful, right? And they know that we care. They know that we want the best for them. And when we have that opportunity to share that with them, as soon as we can get them to buy into it, it's a win-win situation. We're able to teach and teach more, and then they get to buy in because they're wanting more. But overall, I mean, it's an amazing community. They've got a number of trusted teachers that they can go to if they got some situations going on. They've got counselors that care and make sure that their well-being is first and foremost. And even when there's a clash, and it happens with teachers and students. I had one. You're gonna get some that just don't mesh, right? And so for me to be an individual, I'm the adult in the situation, but for me to be an individual that's going to say, well, no, they can't go anywhere. That's you stay in my class. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit, right? We wouldn't work in that environment, and so we're asking them to learn in that environment. So it's really not fair. So we'll make the adjustment if it's going to benefit the student.
Mhm. So, what's the biggest misconception students have about money?
The biggest misconception. Let's see. The biggest misconception. I'm not sure, but I know one thing that they don't understand is how it works.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Um, and I tell all of my students, don't go to work for $20 an hour. You go to work for the company, and then your experience is going to be totally different. And so when you go to work for the company, now you're looking for, being a part of that company, understanding what the leadership is like, and some maybe even, becoming a part of leadership. When you go to work for $20 an hour, that's all you're going to get, right? And so as you navigate through your career, you want to be an individual that understands, right? I'm getting this paycheck. I make $50,000 a year. I can't spend 51, right? And so now taxes come out, right? So when they work for the first time, they realize who is this FICA person that's taking all their money, So that's a wake up call for a lot of them. But understanding that, hey, you're going to have taxes, right? And you got to understand how that tax is going to work. A lot of individuals have the mindset of, I want a big tax return. If you're getting a big tax return, 5, 6, 7 plus $1,000, right? You're giving the government a free loan, typically for about 16 months. They're not going to pay you taxes until you get it back. But you miss a payment, they're going to charge you some interest, right? So understanding how taxes work, getting as close to zero as you can, right? Because if you're getting a big tax return, that's money that you can use throughout the year, right? And then you can make ends meet. You can do a better job with your budget when you got more. And understanding that, putting your money in a place where it can work for you, and understanding that, hey, if I put it in a savings account, I may not even understand what a savings account is, right? That's for savings. You're not trying to, own the bank. But if you're putting your money there for retirement, it's a terrible place for it. And understand that retirement, you're going to need those dollars to grow, right? And then the younger you are, the more aggressive you can be, so you can have the opportunity for those dollars to grow. And so understanding how money works in that way can help them, when they're 30, they start to see it grow. When they're 40, they start to see it grow exponentially. At 50, they're like, man, this thing really works. At 60, they can retire with dignity, right? And if they work, it's a choice. It's not a have to. It's something that they choose to do.
Yep.
But if they never got that lesson, one simple lesson, rule of 72, right? I tell them, I start them out with that rule of 72. What's that? Well, rule of 72 shows you how fast, it's a formula to show you how fast your money can double. And so when you're investing your money, now past performance is not a guarantee of future results, but you get an idea of what it's like, right? So if you net rate of return 3, 6, 12, you can see what that's going to look like down the road. And so giving them that one little piece of information can go a long way. And it's one small piece of the puzzle. However, they got that piece, and now they understand how money works, a little bit of it anyway, right? When you get that check, start budgeting, pay yourself first, because oftentimes we pay ourselves last, and what's left comes, right? And learning to live like that, because down the road is where you're going to need it. We're not always going to be able to work. And if you got the funds to be able to retire and retire early, I mean, that's great too. But if you got the funds and you no longer need to work when it's time for you to retire, you can do that too.
How do you incorporate legacy building into your curriculum?
Yeah. I use me as an example for that. Again, I work to be an open book in my classroom, and so I tell them, hey, my goal is, so wealthy folk, no, well, broke folk plan for the weekend. Wealthy folk plan for 3 generations, right? And so, the money that I am saving, I want to be able to use it. However, I'm thinking about 3 generations down, and what is that going to look like? And when you do the math, I mean, it really doesn't take a whole lot, right? If you're looking at 3 generations down the road, 75 years, I won't be here. However, I'm probably going to have me and my wife will have an oil painting, in my son's house, in my grandkids' house, because hey, we left the legacy, right? They're not gonna have a portrait, they're gonna have they're gonna have an oil painting. This is what they did for us. And then at the same time as we're building, it's imperative that we teach him what he needs to do and what we're doing, because if we don't, my son, he's 23. If something happened to me and my wife now, it's going to be gone probably at 24, right? But we've taught him at an early age. I think we started him out 12, 13 years old, showing him and getting him to understand what money is about. He didn't get, he wasn't an expert, but he understood it, right? And so now he has an idea of how to maintain and how to keep it going, and understanding what it's going to take to build it even more for that next generation, because to whom much is given, much is required. And we want him to be able to, have a nice lifestyle. So we're no longer here, but we also want him to be able to maintain that, and then to pass it on and share it to other generations. The biggest challenge, or the biggest fault that we may have as a community is, well, my kids don't need to be in my business. Well, if you're trying to build a legacy, if your goal is to build a legacy, why would you not want them, right? You're building it for what? If you're building it for them, you want them to be able to sustain that. And if you're building for your grandkids, your great grandkids, well, you got to bring them into the picture and give them, the secrets that you got, right? And then hopefully, you got it here, now they can take it there, right? Your grandkids can go up even higher. So oftentimes we found this in the community is our parents start here, they get here. Didn't really teach us anything, so we start the same place that they started, right? And so now we got to get here, and then if we don't teach our kids gonna start here. Where our counterparts is parents start here, kids start here, grandkids start there, and now you've got that legacy, right? You got that legacy that will allow you to continue to build and build and build. And meanwhile, you're no longer here. A lot of people don't know their great grandparents, but they know Ford, they know the builder, they know all those names, right? But we don't even know our own, great grandparents' names, because of course it was a different time, but they left what they could leave us. There wasn't a whole bunch.
So, what role does emotional intelligence play in teaching business?
Well, I would say that understanding how those emotions can affect you in every situation that you can find yourself in. Understanding your emotions and how your emotions work, and what's gonna help you and what's gonna hurt you, right? We often get caught up in, so well, I use money for example, right? It's an emotional transaction, right? But understanding how that money works and knowing what it's going to take, it can take some of the emotion out. Because again, if it's play money, I'm all in, right? If it's real money, I'm emotionally tied to that, and I don't want to lose it, right? And by me having that mindset, I don't want to try anything. I don't want to start business. I don't want to lose it. I got a family. I got to stay here in this house, this nice, comfortable place. I'm not trying anything, right? But understanding, betting on yourself is the best bet, right? And you can only bet on yourself if you've prepared yourself.
Let's move over to your work in financial industry and empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
What drew you into the financial industry initially?
Initially, I remember around about 10 or 11 years old, me trying to understand what the market was like, and how these people make money, and I could never get that question answered. And so years later, I was able to start getting some understanding. I say around about 25ish of being around individuals that worked in the field and getting those opportunities to learn and grow and to build a business in the financial services industry. And so, because of those individuals, I was able to scratch out carve a little life out of that, just learning what they taught me. And I've got something from a lot of different individuals. One of my managers, he said, you'll always have a job as long as you treat the customer right first. That's your first job, is to treat them right, and then the money will come, right? And so, you just take care of people, and everything else will take care of you. And he was spot on. You don't always want to wear your earnings on your on your back. You want to build some assets. So when you get in position, you don't have to be flashy. You look at some of the wealthiest individuals, families around. Some of them you won't even know it, right? Some of them you will have no idea. So just being able to, having those constraints, and knowing that money is a tool. It's going to make you more of who you are. If you're a jerk, you're going to be a bigger jerk. If you're a super nice person, you're going to be, you have more to be nice with. And so, just to understand those principles.
So, how has your experience in finance shaped your approach to education?
One more time, how does my financial education?
How has your experience in finance shaped your approach to education?
Okay. Okay. Um, well, I know what it's going to take to retire, and having learned that through the financial industries, the financial companies that I work with. At some point in time, you're going to retire. The last thing that those students are thinking about is retiring. But I'm educating them on the process of, all right, so what does it look like in 5 years, right? When you want to buy a house, what is it going to look like in 10 years when you're starting a family? How are those things going to affect you if you don't have the education? Because if we set you out right now, if we let you go right now at the age of 16, you would not be able to survive. And a lot of them think that they can, right? Because they may pay a cell phone bill, or they may, be able to go buy a meal, every now and again. They think they've got life figured out. But when you hit those roadblocks, how do you handle those roadblocks? I remember, my dad, he would help us out, right? They would help us out. But one time that I said, hey, let's, don't need anything financial. Just show me what I have to do. Let's work through this thing and get over it, right? And then I hadn't looked back since, right? So it's that educational component that will get us over the hump. And we got this much confidence now. We can stretch a little bit further. We got that much, and next thing we have a lot of information that we can use to help build whatever an individual's goals are. So just having and seeing what that piece looks like gives me an advantage, I believe, to share with the kids. I mean, these are real life, I have real life clients, that has a lot of money in the market. And so being able to understand how the market moves, and how it can, help or benefit them by being in it or not being in it.
What does financial empowerment mean to you personally?
Yep. Financial empowerment means I can pick and choose what I want to do on my terms. Right. So if I'm empowered, if I have the financial means to be able to, say, hey, you know what? I am done working. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm just gonna travel. That's empowerment. Being able to help someone, or being able to give to your favorite charity, is power. right? That's empowerment. Just being able to be responsible with those dollars that you're given, and putting someone in a better situation or organization in a better situation. There are a lot of individuals that's deserving that just sometimes may need a hand up. There are a lot of great organizations out there that are putting in some really good work. And unfortunately, in this time of day, some of the funding that they used to get is no longer there. And so now it's an opportunity for an individual that has, economic empower that's economically empowered to help, carry that company's or that organization's legacy on, right? And so through that, you kind of get to live forever. You're making those contributions and you're helping, small kids to young adults, get a good start in life.
What are the most overlooked tools for building generational wealth?
The overlooked tools. The rule of 72. Yeah, people are afraid of the market for whatever reason. It's a number of reasons, but the main thing they're gonna talk about, well, I don't want to lose money. Right. The next thing is I don't want people knowing my business. Well, we're going to find out your business in about 3 or 4 months, right? When you got to move out the house, that you so love and dear because you don't want anybody in your business. But I would go back to the rule of 72, understanding that, right, and acting on that. And so the next biggest tool is having a financial advisor. The average advisor can, get you an average return of 3% more. Sometimes a little bit more, but average about 3% more. Now that could be the difference between a couple $100,000 and $1,000,000 when you look at it long term, right? And understanding that these are some, and now you got some snakes out there. I'm not gonna, I don't have the wool through my eyes to think that that's not the case because that, unfortunately that happens. However, there's a way to check to see who your advisor is. FINRA.org. You can go there and check. Before you even work with the individual. Let me check this individual out, see what they got. But rule 72, getting a financial advisor, creating a plan and sticking to that plan. Budgets or spending plans, sometimes they feel they're overrated and that's too much work. But I'm gonna tell you, that's what the wealthy do, right? They have a budget, and even if that budget may look different than yours, but it's still a budget, right?
Yes, it is, most definitely.
Yeah. They may have a budget to spend $100,000 on cars in a year. Yours may be 4,000, but it's still a budget. And I would say that getting around individuals that can lift you up, because if you're the wealthiest and the smartest in the room, we all know that then you're in the wrong room. And so, because you can always learn, you can always gather some more information to help you make a better and more informed decision on what it takes to build that financial wealth that you're hoping to build.
How do you help families move from survival mode to strategy mode?
Yeah. So that takes an honest conversation. If we're looking at and this we'll call this a dry run. All right, give me your expenses and let me see what you got. And they say, well, I don't have any. So okay, give me the checkbook because now the checkbook ain't gonna lie, right? You got something going on. And if we're really going to have an open and honest conversation about getting you from survival to strategy and planning mode, this has to happen. Okay, now we've gone and looked into that checkbook and seen that, you've got $300 in eating out, another $200 of entertainment, and a number of these things. And so when you look at that and we say, now you've got a house look like it has a lot of groceries in it, try eating in this place, the kitchen, it's called the kitchen, right? Try eating there, for a month and seeing what that looks like. Take what you did last month and see what you really didn't need. And then now moving forward, we're going to save those dollars, right? and we got not going to make it painful. But however, there has to be some sort of shock. There has to be something that's going to get them to say, you know what, well, first they got to commit. Yeah, this is something that I want to do. Create a spending plan where it's not too rigid, where they can't do anything, because if it's too painful, who wants to do that, right? So now that spending under control and showing them that they actually can do it. And then from there, we're going to look at, do we invest or do we knock out some of this debt? If the debt is so bad that you can't do anything else, we freed up some dollars. Now let's show you the most effective way to pay that debt off. And when we start dwindling that debt down a little bit, now we can get you to a place where you can start investing. And retirement looks totally different than if you have debt versus absolutely none, right? You might be able to make it on Social Security if it's around, but it's a totally different conversation going into retirement with absolutely no debt, which is the goal that I want to get my clients to be in a position where you have no debt, but you also got a lot of money that you can do some things with, right? You can give to your charity, you can travel. You can give the grandkids, pay for their school, right, and help them get a good start in life. So there are a number of things that we do once we get them out of that survival mode and get them thinking differently than what they thought, maybe their whole life.
So, what's your take on credit as a tool versus a trap?
Oh yeah. So earlier, we talked about, everybody may not be able to pay cash for a house. That's a huge bill, right? And especially today, a few years ago, the price of housing was just skyrocketing, and then on top of that, the interest rates were, they were going through the roof as well. And so, being able to use that credit and having a good credit score can benefit you. But at the same time, when we got my son when he was in college, we got him a credit card that was attached to us, that this is for emergencies, and pizza is not an emergency, right? And so showing him, and I show my students, and I show some of my clients, what that looks like when you pay off that credit card, how much goes towards interest and how much goes towards that principal. And the difference will knock you flat on your backside, right? And understanding how that's going to work, how it's going to benefit you, or how it's going to hurt you. If your credit is jacked up, it's going to hurt, right? And you're spending that credit card because it's convenient. Put it away, right? If you're spending that much on a credit card, you can't afford it, right? And so that's another hard conversation. Sometimes, as an advisor, you may have to have with the client. We got to put them away, right? You've got 10 credit cards. Why 10? You only need one, right? You only need one. If you don't have enough cash, okay, that'll be your emergency, right? But oftentimes if you're going to rent a car, get a hotel, you may need a credit card. But even then, if you do decide to use those cards or that card, and just have a plan to pay it off. The minimum is not a plan, right? And we're talking about less than a year, have a plan to pay those things off sooner if you can. If you can't do that, just wait. There's nothing wrong with delayed gratification. It feels better when you can pay it off, right? And now you don't have that debt hanging over your head.
Well, we live in this society now, especially with these younger folks. I think they call them Gen Zs.
Yeah.
Everything has to be instantaneous. Yeah. I want it now. I want it now.
Yep.
There is not that. It's like the one thing that's so hard, I think, to teach or to help these younger folk to understand is that sometimes when we talk about earlier about discipline and structure, discipline and structure, and you playing it out the long game.
Yes.
That's the whole premise. But now everything is so instantaneous, and I don't know where that came from, but. And just looking at that, now I'm going to be honest with you, because I've got some younger nieces and nephews, and I know that instant gratification thing just runs me totally crazy, because I'm like, well, what do you mean? Because I don't quite understand that.
Yeah.
But it's got to be now. If it ain't now, then, okay, they don't want it.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. Hey, you're absolutely right. I got some too, and they want it now. Even when it's time for investing, they want it now. They want to put $5 in and get 100 out by the end of the day. And I'm telling them, I don't know. Maybe it can happen. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Maybe it can. However, you if you're chasing profits, you're probably going to lose more than you win, right? And again, thinking that long term. I know you don't. I know 60 years from now is 2 million years away. Might as well say 2 million years, right? But it's coming. And do you want to be prepared? I'll ask this: like, what if someone walked through this door right now and gave you a check for $3 million? How would that make you feel? Right? Yeah, it'd be great. I would love that to happen. Well, you have that opportunity too, right? You just can't think of it as right now, right? You're building towards that. You're building something, and I've got some nieces and nephews that will want to put their money into Bitcoin. I'm not advocating or not advocating for it, but I know that there's a lot of regulations that is not regulated. So
Exactly.
yeah, and they see the quick dollar in that, right? And I'll tell them, hey, if you feel you need to, just don't make it the biggest portion of your portfolio. But let's create a plan for you, and let's play out that scenario, right? And as we're doing that, so you don't dip into it, let's create a plan for you to have an emergency account or an account that you're building to do something with, and just know that it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next week. But if we're consistent and disciplined about it, you'll get that thing that you want, and you'll be glad that you did.
How do you address financial trauma in Black communities?
How do I address it? Head on, right? And I let those individuals know that for years and years, we didn't always have those pieces of the puzzle that everyone else has. But now there's absolutely no excuse for you not to have those things, right? I mean, something simple as a wheel. That's too much. Yeah, I hear that. That's too much. Well, try dying without one, right? And it's really going to be too much. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a will, the state's going to have one for you. And I can guarantee you're not going to like theirs. Plan you can have a lot of say from the grave, right? And you can have a lot of say even when you are here, as you're building. If your kids ain't right, and they're gonna go through that money, and at your demise, age 20, 30, and 40, right? And so we know that they'll have those dollars. And just be open and honest with them that there's no problem with where you are, but if you stay there and we know that we can fix this solution, and you don't want to, then that is an issue, right? And if you want to fix this, we can, but it's going to take, it may take a lot of sacrifice. It may take you, 2 or 3 years before you start to see or gain some sort of traction. But that 2 or 3 years is going to come and go. And how do you want to live that 2 or 3 years right now? Do you always want to be in the stage of survival, or do you want to build something and now you're seeing your net worth grow, right? So we always talk about getting a pay and how much money we make. Somebody can make, again, $250,000 and be broke, right? Whereas you may have someone making $50,000 a year and have a net worth of $500,000. And so you want to change the conversation. The conversation with the millionaire and the billionaire is different, right? The conversation between people that don't have $1 million and $1 million is different. And so you want to be able to have those conversations and know that those things are possible. Nobody's different from you. They just did something a little different than you, right? You can do the same thing. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely, it's going to be hard. Is it worth it? Absolutely, it's worth it, right? Do you want that? And if you want that, then there's nothing to think about. There's absolutely nothing to think about. We want to go home. We want to pray over it, and we're going to wait for the Lord to give us a word. Well, if you're not listening, if you can't sit there and listen, how do you know he didn't send me, right? Because you're immediately going to know. And I gotta pray about it. I gotta talk to my pastor about it. Well, bring your pastor here. We'll have a conversation with him, right? Um, I my goal, and I know you got some sharks out there. However, you know, it doesn't take you 2 to 3 weeks to move on something that's going to benefit you and then generations to come, right? And if that is you, then 5 years from now we're going to have the same conversation. Well, we won't have that same conversation because I will be, I'm not banging my head up against the wall, just to have that same conversation. You know what you need to do. You know where you are right now, and if you want to get out of this situation, well, then it's time to move.
Let's move over to your work in community engagement and legacy work.
Mhm.
What does community engagement look like in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, community engagement is, I'm going to say that I have a grandmother who's still with us, and her community and engagement is, I mean, my grandmother's 98 and still involved in the community, right? She still works in the community. She does Meals on Wheels. She have a little tea with some friend. I mean, and she still works, right? And so it's again giving your time, because I believe that I am blessed. I believe that I believe that I'm privileged to have the knowledge and the education that I have, and for me to hold those things would be selfish. And so there's a lot of individuals that can benefit from the knowledge that I have, I believe. And for me to hold that and not share that is extremely selfish. And so what type of a person would do that to me, is a person that's scared to compete. I had a boss once. Well, no, he wasn't my boss, but he was the manager at a place that I worked at. And he said his whole goal was to get his employees, those that he supervised, to a higher position than him, right? And so, I've always carried that with me. And I said, all right, my goal is to move people beyond what I can do, right? So, in getting them to a position, one, where they believe they can do it. Now, you get them to a position where you want to put them in a position. Certainly, my son, and having the grandkids, when that comes, put them at a position that's going to help them continue that legacy. And that's not just financially, that's giving back to the community, and lifting those up in those communities that may not have had the same benefits that you've had, right? And just because they come from that community doesn't mean that they're bad people. They just been handed a different deck of cards. And, you just got to show them how to play cards, right? That's going to help them become successful. And I just believe giving back and being an example. You don't have to go and showcase that. You just do the work, and then the results of that organization will do the talking for you.
So, how do you build trust when entering new community spaces?
Going in, introducing myself, and then just watch them work. You go in and you got 1,000 ideas that you think that's going to work. Without having building relationships, it's not going to work. People are protective, and protective of their communities, and rightfully so. So many people have come, I'm sure, before me, with that snake oil, and try to sell them on that. you know, I don't need snakes, and I ain't got no oil, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And so my goal is really to help you. And so if after we build that relationship, if I can, share something that'll work, that I believe that'll work, I'll share it with you, and I'll leave it up to you. Hey, if you do this, I know this will happen. If you don't, we know where we are. We're in the same position, right? If you take this action, I see the organization potentially moving in this direction, or the community moving in this direction. And years ago when I ran for office, and that was my whole thing, right? I just wanted to be a voice for people who felt they didn't have one. And so and I was fairly new to the community, so getting people to know my name and you're not being from that area is a challenge. That is a challenge. If you've never had one, that is one. And so getting them to trust me that, hey, you know what, this guy is not, that guy that's trying to sell that snake oil. So let's listen to him, right? And that comes through building relationships, listen to folk, and just maybe having a glass of tea with them and just listen to them, what they've gone through, what they would like to see for the community, and if you can add anything, add it. If you can't, be open and honest about that too, because the time will come when that may come back around and say, you know what, he said he could fix it, he did, or he said he couldn't fix it, and that was the honest truth. He wasn't able to, right? And I think people deserve your honesty when it comes to their community.
Well, I agree with you 500% on that, because, again, when I just think about our communities in general,
Mhm.
people are just exploiting these communities like it's nobody's business.
Yeah.
And that even includes people that look like you and I.
Mhm.
And, that is the one thing that I have an issue with that, but I know that I'm not the one that I nobody made me the authority, you know, to run around and do those kind of things. But that just really gets in my craw, and it really bothers me because
Yeah.
I always try to understand, how dare you go into somebody's community where these people already got it rough.
Mhm.
They're looking for something to make their lives a whole lot better. And you go in, and as you say, you use that right term, that snake oil. You
Mhm.
giving them that snake oil, and you done dressed it all up, where
Yeah.
it's like it's doing everything. It's just super fantastical.
Yeah.
And you getting these people to buy into that, and you just taking their money. They ain't seeing no results. Next thing you know, they've been scammed, and everybody's got an issue now. Now
Mhm.
they don't went back into the life of crime.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's just like now they're back into, again, going back to some things that we talked about earlier. They're in survival mode,
Right.
and so when you put people in survival mode, I mean, they got to do what they got to do, but
Mhm.
also at the same time, if they weren't dealt, as you say, they didn't get that deck of cards that was a good deck, then I think it's just more than a right,
Mhm.
for to go back and to help. And that's what I love to do. And
Yeah.
I know that that's what you do as well. And that's what makes you, again, one of those heroes that people really need to get the opportunity to not only see who you are, but the work that you're doing, because you're doing it in so many different facets. And
Mhm.
so when people get to see that, I think it gives them some kind of a ray of light, you
Mhm.
know, but the hope factor goes up. But it's a lot that's got to go into that. So I mean, that's just about time.
Yeah.
But you know, um, what's a project or initiative you're most proud of?
A project or initiative that I'm most proud of?
Yes.
Hmm, Amazing question. Gosh, that I'm really proud of. The work that we do in the Logan community as a board member there. The services that we provide. It's a 5-star daycare, and it's community driven. And the teachers, the director, that of that daycare, they've built an organization that the community can feel proud about, right? And they're happy to have it. And the alumni from that have, in every walk of life, they come back and they have their success of what they've done. Um, and so I would say that is one that I'm really proud of, to be a part of that organization, to help drive that organization to become one of the premier organizations in the county. Um, I am I'm working on. I haven't gotten there yet, but building a next gen of financial advisors that I think will help years down the road. We have the wall of wealth coming, And there's a shortage of advisors, and there's also a shortage of African American advisors. And so, to help educate that next generation that's going to lead this generation to even have more abilities to build wealth. And so, a goal of mine is to train some individuals that's going to be able to take that banner and just keep moving it forward and helping out the community as much as possible, because we have absolutely no excuse now, right? And so, the best way, I believe one of the best ways to do that is to educate that next generation to carry that torch.
Well, do us all this one wonderful favor.
Yes.
Tell the folks that are listening to this show now, and as they listen to it again,
Mhm.
please tell these people who Wendell Fant is and what Wendell Fant can do to help to get folk to where they want to be if they want that help, and who you are.
Okay. So Wendell Fant is not Wendell Fant without being a son that drove his parents up the wall, right? And so I believe that got me to where I am. So I've got parents that never gave up on me. I've got a whole community, of family members that never gave up on me and still encourage me to this day. A husband and a father, right? And so what that means for them is I understand what it's like to be a spouse, right? And not understand what it's like to go through those hard times. I've gone through those hard times. I understand what it's like that you're raising a child, and you want to make sure that their life is better. So here's how all that transpires to me helping those families. One, I care, right? I know how hard I work for my money, right? And I don't want anybody bringing that snake oil anywhere around me. And so I'm going to take care of your money, right? And I'm going to help you build that legacy that you really want, right? And I'm going to educate you so that you have the most material facts so that you can make a great decision and you can start to plan and prepare for your family's generations to come. And so in all of that, sitting down with you and having a conversation and knowing that the information that you get from me, I'm not going to tell you I have all the answers, but I have a group of individuals that can help me. If I don't have the answer, I have a team that will make sure that we get you the right answer. I don't move money just to move money. I don't chase profits. We don't do any of that. We create a strategic plan specifically geared towards you. It's not that cookie cutter thing, right? And I'm not, I've worked for some of the companies. I'm not going to name names, but I work for some of those companies. This 800 number. Right now you call, you're going to get John, right? And you're not 100% sure what you got from John, so you call back, and now you get Kim. Kim tell you something totally different than what John told you. Now you got to call the third time. You're getting the information that should have taken one call and should have taken 5 minutes. Now we're at, an hour and 30 minutes, and you still don't have the information. And you still look shaky on the information that you got, right? And so having a personal advisor like me, one, you get to know me, right? I'm the guy that you might want to invite over for Sunday dinner, right? That's how comfortable I want you to feel. I'm going to educate you before we do anything, right? I want to make sure that you understand what you're getting, because if someone comes and asks you, what do you have? And you need to understand that, hey, I got this, and this is how it's going to help me. This is how it's going to help me build a legacy, right? These are the things that I am doing, and I'm on track now to know that I can reach and achieve all those financial goals that I want to achieve. Right? You'll have an individual that's going to be in constant contact with you, however you choose, that to be, whether it's phone, email, or text, and knowing that, I'm going to touch you at least 4 times a year, right? To check in on you, to see how's it going, and to do a review to make sure that nothing has changed, right? And so a lot of advisors will do that initial work. but then that follow up to make sure that nothing has changed. You got young families, the potential of having additions to that family is going to come, right? You don't want your next call to be, oh, you got a baby and it's 3 months old. Oh my goodness, right? Where have I been, right? And so you missed a valuable opportunity to maybe protect that family or protect that baby, or so that they don't have those issues of paying for college. Start a 529 plan. But most importantly, though, what you're getting, you're going to get an honest guy. And how do you know that? You won't until we sit down and have a conversation and get that feel for it. I'm not going to blow smoke. If I can't do it, I'm going to let you know. If I can do it, I'm going to let you know that I'm the best one to get the job done. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to protect your family. I'm going to educate your kids on that process because you worked hard for those dollars, right? And now you want to make sure that if you go today, you're prepared and your kids can maintain and grow what you've built, right? And that right there is going to allow you to have build a legacy for years to come. So when your grandkids come and say, "Hey, what was Pop like?" Right, and then you could tell them, right, this is what he did. This is why you're able to do some of the things that you're able to do. This is why you're able to go some of the places that and have some of the experiences that you have, is because this individual set up a plan that was way beyond anything that you can outlive. And then now you set your family up.
So look, we've got a couple before I get to Black History, there's some comments here in the chat.
Yep.
This one is from Carmen Tisdale. She says, great info. This one is from B. Irvin. I'm all in moving forward. This one is from Rover 632 WES unknown. Great conversation. And this one is from Shantae Duncan. Awesome interview with a wealth of information. Do you have any comments for those as before I move into the Black History part?
Well, I thank them for that, that comment. And, I work hard to be authentic. That's my goal, and to be transparent, because I know, and I believe that's what I want if someone is sitting in front of me, so, I just really appreciate those comments. And, I hope that I'm living up. My goal is to live up to those comments, because, they mean a lot. Those comments mean a lot to me.
So, well, when we discussed Black History, and I asked you who's the most influential person or persons in your life and your career, you told me Barack Obama, John Bryant Hope, and Eldon Watson Diggs. Why do Barack Obama, John Bryant Hope, and Eldon Watson Diggs resonate so deeply with you?
Yeah. So I want to add another one in there, but I'll talk about these first. President Obama, former President Obama, he gave us hope, right? And that was the first time that we saw that it was possible, right? Not that we could do it, but we saw that it was possible. And those years were the years that I was in, I was a congressional staffer, and I would go visit schools, and those little young kids thought I was the president, right? They were like in the first kindergarten, whatever. Is that President Obama? But he set such a tone and a standard that I work hard to live up to each and every day, right? Because I believe he was above water, meaning that he really cared. When he go visit those devastated counties and cities, and with the Sandy Hook, and you could tell he was genuine and authentic when he would hold one of those little babies, right? And you could tell that he wanted those families to be better. And he, if all he could do was hug them at that time, that's what he did. And so that's the delivery that I always want to, or the standards that I always want to live up to. John Hope Bryant is, we talked about having that frank and open and honest conversation. He does, right? If you ever check anything that this young man says, he is sharp, but he is direct and to the point. And I believe we have to be that way, because there's no time to play, dream, or drift. We have to get this thing done. And he brings it in such a way that's plain, It's not that financial jargon that that we try to figure out. And I believe that he's authentic and really wants people to succeed at the level that they want to succeed, right? And the information that he puts out there, I believe, get them there. Is they just have to be willing and open, to be able to, you know, uh, take what he's given them. But Elder Watson Diggs, started Cap Alpha Psi, so being a part of that, gave me a way to identify with a lot of young men, so and there are a lot of other, great organizations, fraternity organizations out there, African American, that D9, part of that D9, that's great, and they do some great things. But this is the path that I chose, and this amazing path. I've met some amazing individuals. I've got some mentors. I've got some brothers that, when I was over in Iraq, made sure that my family was taken care of, that they didn't have a need. Any need didn't go unmet, right? And so they made sure that they were there, and they took care of my wife and my son, and they looked after, so that's the type of brotherhood that I have to stand up for every single day, because it's just amazing to be around those individuals. And so he created that.
So what did
Mhm. Let me one more. I apologize. So, I just recently lost my father back in June, and him and my mom are two individuals that, again, I said they never gave up on me. They said I was bad. I was a bad kid, right? but they didn't give up on me, and they pushed me and they encouraged me. And my dad left a legacy that I'm able to to move forward. And the things that he instilled in me, fatherhood, husband, a good community guy, and work ethic that was unbelievable. And so, I get to honor him every single day because he left me with those things. And, I miss him, but I get to, do those things. And, and he knows that, we're taking care of mom right now, and we're making sure that she's good. And, so he left us with compassion. He left us with an understanding that, take care of your family, you work hard, and and just be the best human being that you can be. Humanity costs nothing.
there's another comment that just popped up here in the chat. It's from Felicia Miller. I'll show it on the screen. She says, "We appreciate you keeping us informed with financial information for ourselves and our family."
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So what did each of these men teach you about leadership?
About leadership,
Mhm.
President Obama, you just, regardless of what's going on, right? You stay calm. That it's crazy outside, right? But you stay calm, and the more you're calm, that you stay calm, and then people can see that, they're going to feel calm. And so now you can actually begin to work. If everyone is hysterical and going all over the place, right? It's hard to get a lot of stuff done. It's hard to get things done at that time. John Hope Bryant, he's taught me how to, be firm. When do what you say you're going to do, commit to it, right? And Elder Watson Diggs, he said this, or he's done this. This is the legacy that he left. In every field of human endeavor, you work that, right? And achievement is what you're seeking for. You're not seeking for notoriety, but achievement. And through that achievement, you get to uplift your community, you get to uplift your organization, you get to uplift those around you. And my dad, with leadership, you don't always have to be out in front. It's okay to push people up and help them be their level best.
How do you carry their legacy into your own work?
Well, I believe each one of those gentlemen had standards or have standards, that allows me to, to have some of those same standards, and understanding how and the power of those standards, and how that can just separate you from everybody else. It's easy to, to do anything for a couple of hours a day, But when you're doing it for a week, a month, in a year, and decades, having those same standards, I mean, it is tough, but it gets easier as you go and move and navigate. And then now, your work can be your resume, right? So you don't have to say anything. Just let your work speak for you, right? And then long after we're gone, we still have some influence in this world, because we can all think of individuals that has long gone, but still have an impact on the world today. Right? And so in my little community, that's just a goal of mine.
What's a quote or moment from Obama that still guides you?
That still got me.
Guides you.
I like the his book, Audacity of Hope.
Mhm.
And since and I haven't, I've heard that word before, but when he brought it into play, it's really it really made me think about the person that I am and what I need to present, right? The audacity of hope, right? How dare you have hope, you know? So he gave me that, right? And so now I'm, everything's, I have the audacity to think that I can save, the community. I have the audacity to, know that I can raise a young man that's going to be productive and successful and have an amazing family. I have all of those things that's associated with the audacity to do those things. John Hope Bryant, you can be around 9 broke folk. Real soon you're gonna be number 10, right? So you got to watch out who you're around. So yeah.
So, how did John Brian Hope's educational legacy shape your teaching philosophy?
He's straight up and honest, right? I mean, he is firm and he is solid. And I believe that this game of life, when it comes to finances, is just that important, right? We don't have time to play. I don't have time. Your life is too important for me to, not give you my level best and not give you the open and honest, the work or the things that's going to help you become successful. Nobody needs that type of an individual that's not going to be honest with them. They're working to get somewhere, and he's firm on that. He'll tell you straight up, stop playing around. If you want to do the thing, let's do it. If you don't, then I mean, you really have yourself to blame.
What's something about Eldon Watson Diggs that most people don't know but should?
Don't know but should. That well, the organization that he started, is strong and thriving, in that he created an organization that helps build men, right? And not just men, young men and seasoned or chronologically gifted men, because at any point in time, you got the credentials to become a part of Kappa Alpha Psi. You can become that in college or in your career, and so now you get to be a part of an organization that he established.
How do you honor Black history in your financial and educational work?
I honor that every day. By my walk. I encourage individuals to really take a look at where you are, where you want to be, and even where you were, right? And then what kind of shape do you want to leave your community in? Now, your community could be your neighbors, right? Most of the times it's our family, that's our tribe. And so, how do you want to leave your family? What position do you want to leave them in? And so, and figuring that out and understanding what you want that to be, let that be your legacy. Let that be, the thing that you leave behind, and and that you share that with, as many people as you possibly could.
What's your message to young Black men who feel disconnected from their history?
Hmm. A lot of them, and I deal with this on a daily, right? And then, a young man walks by and use the N word. I'm like, come on, right? Let me talk to you. Do you know what that word means? Yes, a term of endearment. No, it is not. Right? The word, just because the years changed, don't mean the words changed, right? And that word has not changed. You go back to the origin of that word, it was nothing good. It was not, and is that how you're greeting, your younger brothers and sisters? Is that how you're greeting them? With that term that caused so much harm and means nothing good. Is that how you're greeting them? Is that how you want to be greeted? Right? If I walked up and called you Mr. Dummy or stupid, how would that make you feel? Right? Well, I mean, it would make me feel pretty bad. Well, that word should have the same meaning. You should feel the same way when you hear that word, right? And rise above that word. And so I believe that there's just a disconnect. And for somehow, some way, some reason that they feel that that word is a term of endearment. And it just rolls off the tongue so easily that they don't even know that they said it half the time or realize that they're saying it half the time. But I go and show them, hey, this is what your ancestors went through just so that you could walk down this hall, just so that you could get an education that they couldn't, right? It was illegal for a lot of them to have a book, to learn how to read. And now you've got that opportunity, and this is how you're honoring them, right? So let's figure out a way that you can honor them. Let's figure out a way that that you got them sitting up in their grave and thinking, yeah, we did that, right? We don't have to worry about this young man. He's got it. And now when you step out into your house, out of your house, people know who you are, right? You're representing your family. Everything that you're part of, you're representing, right? And is that the best that you can represent? If there's a question in your mind, then we need to have a conversation and figure out, what's the best way that you can represent your family or anything that you're part of.
How do you reconcile personal pain with historical pride?
Personal pain, historical pride. Pride gets in the way of a lot of stuff, right? My personal pain. I work I work through it, and don't hide it, and be open and honest about it if there is some pain. Because I believe that men, it's okay for men to hurt, and it's okay for men to cry. When I lost my dad, I cried. And working, if people think that you're just this macho person, but it's killing you on the inside, that's that historical pride that's got you, feeling or thinking some kind of way because you thought that's what men are supposed to do. And it's okay that you're not that, right? It's okay that you're hurting. And I believe you need a group of people around you that's gonna carry you when you're weak, right? You ask for help not because you're weak, but because you want to remain strong. And so, that's what I chose to, that's how I chose to move or navigate in this thing we call life. I let my son know that I'm hurting. I let my wife know that I'm hurting. I let my family know, I'm hurting. I can go to a lot of them and we can have a conversation and walk through it.
Last question.
Mhm.
What legacy do you hope to leave, and how do these three men help shape it?
Yeah. So the legacy that I hope to leave, or my goal to leave, is a legacy of service. A legacy that I'm not trying to get credit for. I don't need credit for. But it's just really moving the needle forward or up, so that next generation can have an opportunity to grow and thrive at whatever it is that they choose to grow and thrive in. For my son, it's showing him what a father is and what a husband is, and something that he can really be proud of and want to uh, walk in my footsteps, right? And move that forward. Do it even better than I did. I believe that's what my dad did for me. And so that's what I want my legacy to be, is a life of service. And great things happen when you don't care who gets the credit. And so I don't need credit for it. Just leaving a legacy of the community better than when I found it.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience? How they can connect with you on social media, your websites, all of that good stuff.
Okay. So so when you're taking notes, right, you got to do more than just take notes. You got to take action, right? Because we could probably run through some notes that we've gotten that we haven't taken action on. One of the things that my wife and I started doing, we started about 3 years ago, and I saw the idea, and I had a friend to tell me that this is what they did, right? So at the end of the year, they plan for that next year. And so planning for that next year, I know if I'm on target or if I'm off target, or we know if we're on target or off target by just doing what we say we're going to do, right? And even if we don't make it to that goal, we've worked hard. We know we've done everything that we could. We may not make all the goals, but now we have a blueprint of how to move forward each and every year. So that's one thing that we do. If I could encourage anyone to do that, right? Set don't you got to be together. You got to leave your house, go to a hotel, go to a different town, and just take that weekend and just do that, right? So we'll plan that, that Friday night, we'll have dinner, come back that Saturday morning and do the work, go through all the things that we did, and then what do we want to stop doing, what do we want to start doing, and what do we want to continue doing, right? And so we go through all of that, and then that Sunday, we have church together, just me and her, and we go through it and wrap up our notes and put that plan into action and go. I would encourage everyone just to take action on one small thing, right? Just one small thing. And then the next time, do that two small things. Just become 1% better each and every day. If you do that each and every day, you'll become 37% better in a year, right? And so now you're leaving the pack and you become this person that you've always meant to be. And, bet on yourself, right? When you bet on yourself, there's a great chance you're going to win. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. So bet on yourself. It's okay to get help. Find those individuals that's going to help you. Find a mentor that's going to help you. Get around people that's going to help you grow and thrive and that's going to push you and be held accountable. It's okay to be, find someone that's going to hold you accountable. They're not going to tell you the stuff that you want to hear. They're going to tell you what you need to hear. And I'm going to tell you right now, sometimes that stuff hurts. It does. It's painful. But if we're looking to grow, that's the only way we can grow, is to be honest with each other, right? And so in doing so, you become that person that you desire to be, right? Without any reservations or any bars held, you become that individual. And now, your walk is doing your talking for you. If anybody want to follow me, on social media, mine is Instagram is Fant_Wendell68. That's Fant_Wendell68. That's on Instagram. That's new. www.primerica.com/WFant is how you can find me online. Or, you can do the good old fashioned thing and, I give you my number, that works too. You can call or text at 704-575-3812 and, and have a conversation. If there are any additional questions, I'm happy to share them with you. I'm happy to do an audit on your finances. We'll confirm one or two things. What you got is good, or you may need for a change, right? And I don't have to be your advisor, but I'll give you that information. That's the ultimate goal, is to be your advisor. But that's something that I'm willing to do because it's that important. And I believe everyone needs to do that. You don't need a whole bunch of money to start a plan, right? You can start with $25 a month, right? You can start with a plan, but you just got to start.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing this time with us, because once again, this has been a very good show. And I know that, it's a long time in between the cycle from your first appearance to now. But I want to tell you that from our connection on LinkedIn, from then up to this point, one thing that I can say is that you have remained, the one thing that you mentioned as we were going along, is consistent. And that consistency means more than a lot of people can really understand until they just get to that point of knowing that as they're moving through this thing called life,
Mhm.
that you've got to be consistent and you've got to keep moving in ways that if you're looking to create a difference or to make a difference, you just got to be consistent with it.
Yes.
And I really do appreciate you for coming back again. And of course, we start season 4 next year, effective January 12th is the premiere. So we've got to get you back in season 4 as well because again, you've delivered the goods once again, and I appreciate you more than you can ever imagine.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the time. The first time was amazing. This time was amazing, and I'm honored that you asked me again. And I'll be honored, if you have me back. And just thank you. Keep up the amazing work that you're doing. And just let's continue to grow and build, and get this community where it deserves to be. And for those individuals that's watching, I thank you for those comments. I thank you for watching, and and share this with you. Share this video with someone you think that could benefit from it, and and bless them in a way that they might not have otherwise been blessed. And again, Brother King, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share with your audience.
Yeah, so for those of you that are watching on all 8 of our channels that we stream live through, I appreciate you more than you can ever imagine. But for those of you that are looking on the YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled all of your notifications, I would definitely appreciate if you would support us. And please subscribe and get all the notifications. As you all are watching and listening to the message that Wendell just gave us, he just gave us a classroom special inside the classroom and outside the classroom. That knowledge is power, but also in the process of having that knowledge, using it wisely to be a benefactor of not just today, but generations down the line. We've got to play the long game, not the short game. The work that he has just described that he does with his students in his classroom, that's a long time coming because there's a lot of teachers that don't actually take that opportunity to do that. But if I'm sure that those students that are in his classes, that they're learning, they're benefiting, and they're definitely going to use it because of one thing. That is the discipline and the structure of that classroom that's remaining consistent. That's the everlasting impression. So if we want to do this not just in a classroom, but also in our communities, let's remain consistent and let's set out the goal, create the goal, have the plan, and execute it and make it happen. We can all do this together because it's going to take a whole village. It's not going to be one individual. It's a village. So we're all in this together. And this is a message that we should all take starting today, going forward. That if we want our communities to be what we want them to be, let's put something in it. Let's put something in it. Because having that capital in the community means that you've got more than you could ever imagine. It's those people outside that we've got to be careful of. I want to thank you all for watching. Please come back and watch us again tomorrow night as we have another exciting show for you on American Black and White, where we will continue to color conversations on the canvas of America. You all have a great evening. See